Welcome to Legal Aid Live on Facebook. As we get ready to start, just a few reminders. Questions are welcome. Please post them in the comments. Our speaker will respond to as many as possible in our 30 minutes. Also, we are recording this event. My name is Ann Sweeney. I'm the managing attorney for community engagement with the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. Thank you for joining us to learn more about the Center for Disease Control Eviction Moratorium. Before I turn to my colleague and our topic, I want to be sure you know some of the basics about legal aid. Legal aid secures justice and resolves fundamental problems for people who are low income and vulnerable across Northeast Ohio. We serve clients in Cuyahoga, Ashtabula, Geauga, Lake, and Lorain counties. We assist with a variety of problems related to housing, money, benefits, employment, family, and more. Generally, households with income at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines are eligible for our free services. Anyone who is in need of assistance can apply by telephone at 1-888-817-3777, or you are welcome to apply online at www.lasclev.org. In the bottom right-hand corner of our website, you'll see a button, Apply for Free Legal Help, and that will take you to our online application. Now, I would like to introduce my colleague, Lauren Hamilton. Before we dive in, Lauren, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your work representing clients.
Thanks, Ann. So I'm a staff attorney in the Right to Counsel program at Legal Aid. I'm a native Clevelander. I went to law school at Cleveland Marshall, and I decided to go to law school because I wanted to help people have better lives. And I thought a career in law would be the best way to use my skills in order to do that. After graduating from law school, I started my own firm and mostly practiced family law, representing kids in juvenile court who were being removed from their homes. Eventually, I went to work at a small nonprofit called Nueva Luz Urban Resource Center. That was where I got my first taste of housing law and eviction defense. Earlier this year, I joined Legal Aid to focus on representing tenants in housing court in Cleveland as part of the Right to Counsel program. I'm grateful to be able to help families navigate a system that is stacked against them during what can be a really scary time in their lives. The most rewarding part of my job is to see the feeling of peace and sense of relief that comes over my clients when we successfully fight an eviction and they get to remain in their homes.
So Lauren, I'm curious, you mentioned having recently started at Legal Aid. In fact, you started with us during the pandemic. How has COVID most significantly impacted tenants from your perspective?
Yeah, so COVID has made a huge impact on the availability of housing, as well as the ability of families to be able to pay their rent at all, or to pay their rent on time. I have clients who want to move because their landlords aren't making repairs to their properties, but when they go to look for new housing, there's just nothing out there. Landlords are reluctant to rent right now because finding a new tenant means a lot of foot traffic in and out of the property, which could expose them to COVID. The most significant impact of COVID, however, has been on household income and the ability to pay rent. Some folks have had their hours reduced. Many have lost their jobs altogether. Single parents might be unable to work because their children's daycare is shut down, or their children are required to do virtual schooling.
So to follow up on that last point about tenants not being able to afford rent and the financial hardship that was caused by COVID, my understanding now is tenants do have some protections potentially. Can you tell us more about the order issued in September by the Centers for Disease Control?
Sure. So the CDC issued an order that temporarily puts a hold on evictions based on non-payment of rent for qualifying tenants, and that goes through the end of 2020. In order to invoke the order's protections, a tenant must sign what's called the CDC declaration and must serve that declaration upon their landlord. The declaration states that they meet certain criteria that makes them a covered tenant under the CDC order.
Great. So let's get into some of those details. This is a little bit complicated, but can you tell us specifically who qualifies for protection under the CDC order?
Sure. So there are 5 criteria that a tenant has to meet in order to qualify. First, the tenant has to be using best efforts to obtain financial assistance to pay rent. So that might include applying for government assistance like a CMHA housing program. That might include applying for rent assistance through CHN. Using best efforts basically means to apply for the housing assistance, the rent assistance that you are aware of. Second, the tenant has to be earning less than $99,000 per year for a single person or $198,000 a year for a couple, was not required to file taxes for the year 2019, or received a government stimulus check, which in most cases people have. Third, the tenant must be unable to pay their full rent due to a substantial loss of income. And that can be because of reduced hours, that can be because of a lost job. It can also be due to extraordinary medical expenses. The tenant must also be using best efforts to make partial rent payments, taking into account other household expenses. So there could be months in the past where the tenant was unable to pay rent at all. As long as the tenant is making best efforts to make partial payments, they should qualify for the order. And then finally, an eviction would likely cause the tenant to be homeless, move to a shelter, or have to move to a shared residence where there are multiple people and or families living there. And that shows the intent of the CDC order, which is to prevent the spread of COVID.
Great. Thank you for walking through that. That is a lot of information. And I want to make sure folks know that a lot of what you are sharing tonight is also available on Legal Aid's website. So let me just show that really quick here. This page, you can see the URL at the bottom, but this page will give folks all the details about this order, including those 5 qualifying criteria that Lauren just described. I also want to point out this link at the top because my next question for you, Lauren, is about this declaration. You said a tenant has to give their landlord a declaration. What is that and how would a tenant complete that?
The declaration is actually the most important part of the order because in order to invoke the protections under the CDC order, the tenant has to sign the declaration and serve it on their landlord. So the declaration is a signed statement that the tenant qualifies for the protections provided under the CDC order based on meeting those 5 criteria I just listed. The form is available through several websites, including the CDC's website, as well as our website, which you just pointed out. The form has to be signed and delivered to your landlord. I recommend keeping proof that you delivered it. So either save the email that you sent it with or send it by certified mail. At a minimum, you'll want to keep a copy of the date that you delivered it.
Great. And you mentioned earlier, this protection from eviction is only temporary and that it does not apply to all evictions. Can you say a little bit more about that?
So the CDC order, as of now, is scheduled to end at the end of this year on December 31st, 2020. That could always change. But as of next year, as of January 1st, 2021, landlords will be able to evict tenants for non-payment or other reasons, even if the tenant had provided a declaration at some point this year. So tenants must also continue to try and pay rent throughout this period of time. Whatever back rent they owe currently will be added to the rent that continues to accrue until the end of the year. So the CDC order only prevents the eviction itself. It does not relieve the tenant of the obligation to pay rent. And then the CDC order doesn't apply to evictions for other reasons. A landlord can still file an eviction for other lease violations or unlawful conduct.
Great, thank you so much for explaining those protections available to tenants from the CDC order. I want to just give folks watching a chance to post any questions, please use the comments feature and we will do our best to respond to anything you're wondering about related to this order and the protection available to tenants. Lauren, does the declaration have to be completed before an eviction is filed, or could a tenant give it to their landlord while a case is already pending?
The tenant can sign and deliver the declaration at any point before or while an eviction is pending. So even after the court has entered the eviction judgment. I recently had a client where we served the declaration and filed it with the court a few days before the scheduled move out. So just a few days before the eviction was actually about to occur, and we were able to stop it.
Great, that's good to know. And then can just one of the people in the household or on the lease sign the declaration and protect everybody in the household, or does everybody have to sign it?
No, actually, the CDC order specifically states that each adult that's listed on the lease must sign the declaration, their own declaration, and serve that declaration on the landlord.
Another question I think would be helpful to clarify is, who can use this? Does this declaration work everywhere in all cities, or is this just in certain locations?
Well, it's an interesting question. So it's a federal agency, so the order does apply everywhere. However, courts may differ in the way that they're interpreting the order, as well as the order's requirements. And we've already started to see the way this is playing out. Some courts are requiring only that the tenant sign and serve the declaration on their landlord. Others may want proof of, evidence of the actual criteria listed on the declaration. So proof of the substantial loss of income, or proof that the tenant has applied for rent assistance or made partial payments.
And when executing these declarations, does that have to be witnessed or notarized? What does the tenant have to do to properly complete that?
The declaration form that's been issued by the CDC does not have to be witnessed or notarized. It just has to be signed and dated by the tenant. However, like I said previously about how some courts are interpreting the order differently, there are courts that have modified the CDC's form to require notarization. So they basically come up with their own version of the form.
All right, so I want to shift back to one of the requirements you mentioned. You said that in order to qualify under this order, tenants have to attempt to secure financial assistance for rent. How would somebody go about doing that?
Well, in Cuyahoga County, we recommend that clients start out by applying with CHN Housing Partners. And the website for that is neorenthelp.org. The entire application can be completed on that website. You can submit documents. And once you're done there, CHN will follow up with you. In Lorain County, you would apply with the United Community Assistance Network. It's also known as UCAN. Their website is youcanapply.org. In Ashtabula County, you can apply with Catholic Charities. Their phone number is 440-992-2121. And in Lake and Geauga counties, you can apply with the Fair Housing Resource Center at 440-392-0147.
Great, thank you. So I think it would be important to also share for anyone listening, where can tenants go if they need help with an eviction? Where should they start?
So tenants facing eviction can start with contacting legal aid to see if they qualify for our legal services. Like you said at the beginning of our presentation today, you must be at or below 200% of the federal poverty limit. We can't help everyone who's facing an eviction here at Legal Aid, but we may be able to make a referral to someone who can help. if you're in Cleveland and you're facing an eviction in Cleveland Municipal Court and you're at 100% or below the federal poverty limit and you have one or more minor children in your household, you would qualify for free legal services under the Right to Counsel program, which is the program that I work with. So anyone at or below 100% of the federal poverty limit with children. And then finally, you can call our tenant information line at 216-861-5955 or 440-210-4533. You can leave a message at one of those numbers and someone will get back to you within 48 hours and can provide you with basic information on how to fight an eviction.
Lauren, thank you so much. I would invite anyone watching to take this last chance to post a question or a comment if you have one. We are going to be wrapping up, but this has been tremendously informative, and I just really thank Lauren for sharing your expertise on this topic. I hope that as many tenants as possible will be taking advantage of this protection offered by the CDC's order and visiting our website and other sites to understand exactly how it applies and how to take the steps necessary to benefit from it. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Anne.